we have Alex Traiman, who joins us quite a bit here on Live Now from Fox to break down all of the latest. Alex, thank you so much for being here with us.
Josh, great to be with you again.
Of course. And first off, I want to start by asking you about this death that we were just talking about. A 27-year-old woman now killed, and I want to pop up her picture right here on your screen. Explain to me what this kind of tells us about the Iran, Hezbollah firing there at civilian areas versus at military areas.
Well, we've seen throughout this war that even when it began on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas crossed the border into southern Israel, they attack civilians. When Hezbollah is firing, they're firing at kibbutzim that are, just civilian enclaves in the north of the country. When Iran fires ballistic missiles, they're using cluster bombs over massively populated civilian areas. So this has been from the beginning, the war crime to really just attack Israeli civilians, as opposed to Israel, which is hitting strategic military targets on all fronts and is doing everything that it can to warn civilians to get out of harm's way.
We also know that just a few hours ago, we were hearing essentially that there was a missile of some kind that struck right near a power plant area, a major power station, and that's over in Hadera. How serious, how catastrophic of a situation could that have been if it had actually struck a power station in that area?
Well, I think every single one of Iran's ballistic missile strikes could have been absolutely catastrophic. The fact that Israel has a sophisticated missile defense system to prevent the majority of these missiles from hitting the ground is, I think, the only thing that keeps Israel able to fight this war. A lot of the strikes have been close to targets, have landed near to buildings, have hit on the outskirts of potential military or infrastructure targets. Any single one of these ballistic missiles could do immense damage to the country. And so far, Israel, for all the damage that is sustained, and it is significant damage, I think has been very, very fortunate that the damage hasn't been dramatically worse.
I want to talk about the sirens because I mentioned this kind of off the top, but again, we are having sirens there across Israel that are blaring. They are sounding pretty much constantly there. Explain to me what it's been like on the ground, specifically where you're located.
Well, it really depends on the situation that a specific individual is in. Many of the apartments that have been built in the last 20 to 30 years will have a safe room. So if a siren goes off, people just get into their safe rooms. For people that don't have a safe room in their apartment, many of them have to find shelter in residential communities or in, near to where their office buildings might be. People are still out and about. They're going shopping. People are preparing now for the Passover holiday. And so sometimes they might be in a supermarket or a mall when a siren goes off and they need to go in. Israel has a very sophisticated warning system. You're showing there a clip, a little screenshot of the warning system. Individuals get an alarm on their phone, an emergency alert that a missile has been launched. It could be going toward their area. And then within a few minutes, you get a more precise alert. The alert system has really divided up the country into about 16 different provinces. And we're talking about a country that the whole size of it is about the state of New Jersey. So it's cut up into these little provinces, and then you get a specific targeted alert if a missile is incoming over your area or could be intercepted over your area, which leaves a risk of shrapnel fragments if the missile is in fact intercepted.
I'm going to pop this up on your screen. I mentioned this also off the top, but this is some of the video that was released by the IDF from a short time ago as they say Hezbollah terrorists who were firing there at the Israel Air Force, they were eliminated. You can see, again, that very graphic video here from an aerial view. Explain to me kind of the fight here against Hezbollah, because you hear a lot about the situation with the U.S. and Israel fighting against Iran. But it's also important to remember that over in Lebanon, you have Israeli soldiers that are working to combat the Hezbollah terror group as well.
Well, for Israel, this has been a seven-front war, and one of the primary fronts has been Hezbollah operating in southern Lebanon, which is immediately to the north of Israel's border. They are in control of that southern area, and Israel has been working over the past really 2.5 years to be pushing them away from the Israeli border, and even going house to house in southern communities in Lebanon, where they're finding missiles, tunnel entrances, and rocket launchers, as well as RPGs and other light weapons, which could be used to attack against Israel. And so at this point, Israel is taking the majority of the area up until what was called the Litani River, which is in some cases about 10 miles north of the Israeli border, as a buffer zone. And they're working to clear out that area together with airstrikes all over the country, including in the Beirut area and the suburbs of Beirut and the Dawiya suburbs, really just to file back Hezbollah's capabilities. Before this war broke out with Iran, Hezbollah's capabilities were believed to have been filed down about 70 to 75% in the previous rounds of war, and Israel now looking to file them down even further.
Now, we don't have a lot of information necessarily about President Trump's 15-point potential ceasefire plan that has reportedly been submitted over to Iran. Do we know at this point if Israel is playing any kind of role in that, if there is coordination between the U.S. and Israel on that 15-point plan?
I think there's definitely coordination. It doesn't necessarily mean that Israel wants to be going ahead with a negotiation at this time. When you think about the 15-point plan, you think about the 20-point plan that Trump presented that effectively ended the harshest rounds of violence in Gaza. But that at the top of that 20-point plan was the return of all Israeli hostages, living and dead. And so Israel was willing to go along with it. It could be that if Iran is willing to meet the 15 terms, that Israel will be satisfied. But there's a few questions here. Number one is, who is the president of the United States actually negotiating with? And does that party have the power to effectively halt the firing of ballistic missiles at Israel, at other countries across the Gulf, and can guarantee safe passage of ships through the Straits of Hormuz? The second thing I think is important to note is that really before all of Trump's major attacks, specifically against Iran, you did have what Trump was calling a round of negotiations. So before this 12-day war operation Rising Lion last year, you had President Trump giving like a 60-day period to a negotiation. And then what we saw was on day 61, Israel began that 12-day war, which culminated with the Operation Midnight Hammer and the United States bombing the Fordo nuclear reactor. Here before Operation Epic Fury and Roaring Lion by Israel, there was a negotiation that really wasn't going anywhere, and then it went towards again with this major operation. It could be now. Here you're seeing a pause in attacks specifically on energy infrastructure and oil infrastructure inside Iran. But it could very well be that if these negotiations don't bear fruit, which is, I would suggest is one of the likely scenarios, that you might see President Trump together with Israel going after Iran's oil infrastructure, including Karg Island in the Persian Gulf, and potentially taking full control of the Straits of Hormuz.
You talked a little bit there about Operation Epic Fury as well as Operation Roaring Lion. I wanted to kind of get your take on whether there is any difference between the two. We know in the U.S. you hear a lot about Operation Epic Fury. Over in Israel, we've heard Netanyahu and others talk about Operation Roaring Lion. Is that essentially the same operation?
Well, I think as far as Iran is concerned, it's the same operation. You have what Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth both stating you have the world's two most powerful air forces in the world attacking in tremendous coordination with one another. I think that the differences relate to what are the specific targets. We see the United States really focusing much of its targeting of nuclear facilities, military facilities, the Navy, especially in the Persian Gulf and even as far away as in the Indian Ocean by the waters of Sri Lanka. Although we just recently saw Israel attacking some naval installations in the Caspian Sea to the north north of Iran. But I think a major difference here is that Israel is really targeting at the regime, and you hear the United States talking about the ballistic missiles and the nuclear weapons and the passage of ships through the Straits of Tiran as its goals. You don't really hear Israel talking so much about the passage through the Straits of Hormuz as its primary goal, but you do hear Israeli officials talking about creating the conditions for a regime change. And so, from the first moment in this war, Israel took out the supreme leader Ali Khamenei. They took out Ali Larijani. They've taken out other major members of the top levels of the Iranian command and control, including the heads of state. But you've also seen Israel attack at the besieged checkpoints, the various IRGC checkpoints, mid-level command, really trying to create the conditions on the ground where the Iranian people can rise up and overthrow their regime from the ground.
You're looking at a post here from CENTCOM, that's U.S. Central Command. They said U.S. Air Force A-10 Thunderbolt II attack aircraft have been used to strike Iranian naval vessels during Operation Epic Fury, and they posted a photo there on the left-hand side. Now, going back to what we were just talking about here, the U.S. and Israel have essentially been hand in hand as all of this is playing out. We know that they carried out the joint strikes, of course, together on Iran when all of this began. So can you kind of explain the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, where it stands now versus maybe where it did a year, 2 years ago?
Well, certainly since President Trump got into office, you've seen a dramatic improvement in the ties between Jerusalem and Washington. You've seen throughout the time when President Trump's been in office that there are continuous media reports trying to signal that there is some kind of a rift for various reasons, a new reason every other week between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think that there are a lot of parties out there that would like to see there be a rift between Trump and Netanyahu. I've personally been covering several of the visits by Prime Minister Netanyahu to Washington as well as to Mar-a-Lago. And from everything that I can see and from the statements that both President Trump makes and Prime Minister Netanyahu makes, is that the relationship between the two leaders is excellent and in many cases has never been better.
As far as reaching almost the 1 month mark, we are almost at 1 month since this war really began here. And I wanted to ask, because I talked to you back when everything first happened and all of this was developing, did you think, based on your expertise, that all this time later, 4 weeks later, we would still be where we are now with everything still kind of unfolding there?
Well, we received, briefings from here in Israel, and we also heard reports, from the U.S. administration, all of them signaling that this could be many weeks. I think nobody thought it could be less than 2 weeks. I think many people believed it could be last a month, or it could go even 6 weeks. We just heard a report from an IDF spokesperson less than a week ago suggesting that Israel had hit half of the targets in its target bank so far. So, I think that people are not necessarily surprised that it's lasted this long. I potentially would be surprised if in another month from now we're having the same conversation. I think that we're probably more than the halfway point in this war, and you're already starting to see President Trump, through his discussing potential negotiations, looking towards a potential off ramp here. Although this is a war, and as President Trump has said, Iran has never lost a negotiation, but has never won a war. So we don't know how these negotiations are going to go. It's highly possible that both Israel and the United States have escalation tactics here, that we might even see the war get more intense over the coming weeks. But I do think at least from the Israeli estimates, that you're more than halfway through this war, and all parties would like to see it winding down, I think, in the next month.
And of course, we'll see how all of that plays out. Alex Traiman there at the Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Anything we missed that you want to make sure to add before I let you go?
Well, I do see the way President Trump is, keeping everybody on their toes. Many Israelis wondering, what he means when he says things like the Iranians have given something, not saying exactly what that is, or whether there could be a negotiation, whether a negotiation could be successful. Ultimately, I think what Israelis are looking for is not just an off ramp, but who is going to be ruling Iran on the day after. I think as far as Israel's concerned, if you have some hardline cleric or a member of the current hardline regime taking over, and you don't see a complete resolution, that it means that there's a likelihood that Israel and Iran will be in another round of fighting at a certain point. If you do see a pathway towards a change in the regime, maybe a Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah of Iran, or someone from the Iranian opposition that is interested in normalizing relations with the entire international community, with the United States, and even with the state of Israel, then I think that most Israelis would be comfortable seeing this war come to a speedy end.
All right. Alex Traiman, thank you again for taking the time to join us. We definitely appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me.
I don't want to pop this up on